Nick Reiner wiped the grease from his hands and squinted at the setting suns painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. Another day of fixing broken mining equipment was behind him, but the night ahead promised something better than the monotony of colonial life. The maintenance yard's gate creaked as he wheeled out his hoverbike. Ancient thing, but he'd kept it running through sheer stubbornness and mechanical genius. The bike hummed to life beneath him, its familiar vibration a comfort as he guided it past the colony's perimeter fence. "Going out again, Reiner?" Security Officer Martinez's voice crackled over the checkpoint speaker. "You know the regulations about night excursions." "Just some testing, Sarah." New stabilizer configuration. The lie rolled easily off his tongue after months of practice. Back before midnight. "Your funeral if the sandwolves get you." The gate lifted with a hydraulic hiss. "Don't make me file a missing persons report." The moment he cleared the boundary, Nick opened the throttle. The hover bike surged forward, kicking up a rooster tail of red dust as he cut across the desert. Out here, away from the colony's perpetual noise and the constant demands for repairs, he could breathe. The first moon was rising when he reached his usual spot, a hidden canyon where crystalline formations caught the starlight like frozen tears. Nick killed the engine and pulled out his sketchbook. Few knew about his hobby. Fewer would understand why a mechanic bothered drawing landscapes that never changed. A flash of silver caught his eye. Nick froze, pencil hovering above paper. There, between the crystal formations. Something moved, something that didn't belong in this desolate place. He set down his sketchbook and drew his utility knife. "Hello?" His voice echoed off the canyon walls. "Someone there?" A soft keening sound answered him, like wind through broken glass. Nick edged closer, following the glint of feathers? Silver feathers that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight. The creature lay crumpled against a crystal formation, its wing-like appendages bent at unnatural angles. Blood that shimmered like mercury stained the red sand beneath it. As Nick approached, it raised its head, fixing him with eyes like molten gold. "Shit," he breathed. Nothing in the colony's wildlife guides mentioned anything like this. The creature's form suggested bird, but its features were almost elegant, alien. The creature tried to rise and collapsed with another crystalline cry of pain. Nick knew he should walk away. Unknown alien life forms were trouble. The gangs that operated in the outer colonies would pay fortunes for exotic specimens, and asking questions got people killed. But those eyes held him, filled with intelligence and something that looked terrifyingly like desperation. "I must be losing my mind." Nick shrugged off his jacket and approached slowly, hands raised. "Easy there. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature watched him, its head tilting in an eerily human gesture of assessment. When he was within reach, it snapped at him with a sharp beak. "Hey!" Nick jerked back. "I'm trying to help, you ungrateful chicken." Was it his imagination, or did the creature's eyes narrow at the insult? He tried again, this time speaking in the soft tone he used with skittish machinery. "Look, you're hurt. Bad. I can help, but you need to trust me." This time when he reached out, the creature remained still. Its feathers were warm and impossibly soft under his fingers. Up close, he could see patterns in them, like circuit boards etched in silver. Getting it onto the hoverbike proved challenging. The creature was lighter than it looked, but its injured wings spanned nearly 2 meters. Nick finally managed to cradle it in his jacket, securing it to the bike with cargo straps. "Martinez is going to kill me," he muttered as he approached the checkpoint. He killed the bike's lights and took a maintenance access road that skirted the main gate. The colony's security systems had blind spots if you knew where to look. His workshop sat on the colony's edge, a cluttered haven of tools and half-finished projects. Behind it stood an old chicken coop, a relic from the colony's early attempts at sustainable farming. Nick cleared a space among the spare parts and laid the creature on a bed of clean rags. "Home, sweet home," he told it, setting out a bowl of water. "Try not to die while I find something for those wounds." The creature made a sound suspiciously like a snort. Over the next few days, Nick fell into a strange routine. Work at the maintenance yard, then rush home to check on his patient. The creature's wounds healed with impossible speed, leaving no trace of injury. It watched him constantly with those unnerving golden eyes, and sometimes when he talked to himself while working, he could swear it was mouthing the words. Then came the morning he walked in to find it speaking. "These accommodations," it said in a perfect mimicry of his voice, "are beneath contempt." Nick dropped his toolbox. "You can talk?" The creature ruffled its feathers in what looked remarkably like a shrug. "These accommodations," it repeated, this time in Martinez's voice, "are beneath contempt." "Great. I'm harboring a cosmic parrot with attitude." Nick crossed his arms. "Any other tricks I should know about?" That night, he found out. He was heading to the coop for a final check when silver light poured from every crack in the old structure. Nick burst through the door, expecting fire, and stopped dead. Where the bird-like creature had been, a woman stood. Her hair fell in silver waves. Her skin seemed dusted with starlight, and those same golden eyes regarded him with aristocratic disdain. "Well," she said in a voice like chimes in a winter wind, "I suppose you'll have to do." Nick's brain caught up with his eyes. You're Princess Lirana of the Zenitari," she supplied, brushing dust from her luminescent gown with elegant fingers. "And you, human, have been keeping me in a chicken coop." "It was that or the tool shed," Nick managed. "Your Highness?" Her lips twitched. "The tool shed might have been an improvement," says the princess who spent 3 days pretending to be a bird. "I was healing." She drew herself up regally. "And now that I have recovered, thanks to your adequate care, I shall—" She swayed suddenly, catching herself against the wall. Nick stepped forward automatically. "You're not recovered enough to go anywhere. I don't recall asking your opinion." But she didn't resist when he guided her to sit on an overturned crate. "Look, Your Highness, I've got questions. A lot of them. But right now you need rest, and I need a drink." He ran a hand through his hair. "How about we start fresh in the morning? I promise the accommodations will improve." Lirana studied him for a long moment. "You're taking this rather well. I fix things for a living. Right now you're just another broken piece that landed in my workshop." He gave her a crooked smile. "Even if you are the prettiest broken piece I've seen." "Careful, human." But there was something like amusement in her golden eyes. "I'm not one of your machines." "No," Nick agreed, heading for the door. "You're much more trouble." Her soft laugh followed him out into the night, and Nick knew his life had just become exponentially more complicated. But as he glanced back at the coop, now glowing softly from within, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Not yet, anyway. The next morning found Nick staring at his coffee maker, wondering if alien princesses drank caffeine. He'd spent half the night converting his workshop's small office into something resembling living quarters, all while trying to convince himself he hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. A crash from the office answered that question. He found Lirana examining his collection of salvage tech parts, a broken quantum regulator at her feet. She wore the same ethereal gown from the night before, though it seemed to shift and adapt to her movements like living mercury. "Your technology is primitive," she announced without turning around. "Says the woman who just dropped 1,000 credit part." Nick rescued the regulator. "Coffee? I prefer not to poison myself with stimulants." "More for me, then." He took a long sip. "So, want to tell me why a princess was playing injured bird in my backyard?" Lirana's shoulders tensed. "Want to tell me why a mechanic lives alone on the edge of a mining colony, drawing pictures of empty landscapes?" "Touché." Nick leaned against his workbench. "But I'm not the one hiding from something. Everyone's hiding from something." She picked up another piece of tech, this time handling it more carefully. "This colony, it's not in any major trade routes. No strategic value. Perfect place to disappear until you crash land in someone's favorite canyon." Her golden eyes flashed. "I did not crash. I made a tactical decision to reduce altitude rapidly." "Is that what princesses call it?" Nick grinned. "Look, I'm not trying to pry, but if someone's looking for you, they won't find me." She set down the part with deliberate care. "Unless someone tells them where to look." The threat in her voice was clear. Nick raised his hands. "Hey, your secret's safe. I'm not exactly fond of authorities myself, but if you're staying, We need a better story than mysterious woman appears in mechanic's workshop. I don't intend to. She swayed again, catching herself on the workbench. Nick moved to steady her, but stopped at her warning look. You're still healing. Your powers of observation are remarkable. But there was less bite in her tone. Perhaps a few days of recovery would be prudent. Glad we agree. He gestured to the office door. I made up a cot. Not exactly palace standards, but better than the chicken coop. Marginally. She glided past him, then paused. Thank you, Nicholas Rayner. Nick, he corrected. Only my mother called me Nicholas, usually right before grounding me. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I imagine that happened frequently. You have no idea, Princess. Lorana, she said softly, then added more sharply, but only in private. To others, if we must interact, I am your cousin, visiting from the inner colonies. My cousin, Nick snorted, with silver hair and skin that literally glows. She raised an elegant eyebrow. The silver in her hair dulled to a more human shade, and her skin lost its starlit sheen, though her eyes remained impossibly gold. Better? That's handy, he whistled low. Any other tricks I should know about? Many. She disappeared into the office. But I wouldn't want to overwhelm your primitive mind all at once. Nick shook his head, grinning despite himself. Sweet dreams, Your Highness. Her only response was to close the door with more force than necessary. The next few days settled into an odd rhythm. Nick worked his usual shifts at the maintenance yard, then spent evenings answering Lorana's increasingly precise questions about Earth technology, colonial politics, and human customs. She was a quick study, absorbing information with an intensity that would have been unnerving if it wasn't so impressive. Your species is incredibly inefficient, she declared one night, watching him repair a mining drill's control panel. This could be automated with basic quantum programming. Not everyone has access to fancy alien tech. Nick soldered another connection. Besides, some of us like working with our hands. Yes, I've noticed your tendency toward manual labor. She leaned closer, her temporarily darkened hair falling forward. Though your technique is not entirely unfortunate. Was that almost a compliment? He glanced up, finding her face inches from his. Careful, Princess. People might think you're warming up to us primitives. Hardly, but she didn't move away. I simply believe in acknowledging competence, rare as it may be on this planet. High praise indeed. Nick focused on his work, trying to ignore the scent of stardust and something exotic that seemed to follow her. Speaking of this planet, you never did say why. A pounding on the workshop door cut him off. They both froze. Reiner, Martinez's voice. Open up! Security sweep! Lorana's form shimmered, but Nick caught her arm. No bird form. Too suspicious if they find you. Just act human. How degrading. But she stayed solid, adjusting her appearance to its more mundane configuration. Nick opened the door to find Martinez and two security officers. Evening, Sarah. What's with the welcoming committee? Reports of unusual activity in the area. Martinez's eyes scanned the workshop. Strange lights, unauthorized vehicles. She spotted Lorana. And unauthorized visitors? My cousin, Nick said smoothly. Lieutenant. From the inner colonies. Her transport was delayed, so she's staying with me until the next shuttle. Martinez's hand rested on her stunner. No visitor permits filed. An oversight. Lorana stepped forward, her voice carrying that precise mix of apology and authority that seemed universal among the privileged. I'm afraid I imposed on my cousin rather suddenly. If there's paperwork to complete. There is. Martinez relaxed slightly. Report to administration tomorrow. And Reiner? Next time, follow protocols. We've had reports of smugglers in the sector. After they left, Nick let out a breath. That was close. Indeed. Lorana's expression was troubled. They're searching for something, or someone. Yeah, well, let's hope they don't find either. Nick returned to his repair work. Want to tell me what they might be looking for? Lorana watched the door for a long moment. No, she said finally, but perhaps it's time I told you why I'm here. Nick set down his tools. Something in her voice made him think he wasn't going to like what came next. He was right. The twin moons had risen by the time Lorana finished speaking. Nick sat on his workbench, trying to process everything she'd told him. "Let me get this straight," he said finally. "You're not just any princess. You're the last survivor of an ancient civilization with technology so advanced it might as well be magic. And now some interstellar alliance wants to, what? Harvest your DNA? Crude, but essentially correct." Lorana paced the workshop, her movements carrying a predatory grace. "The Zenitari were architects of reality itself. Our genetic structure contains secrets that your species can barely comprehend. And these Alliance folks? They comprehend just fine. They understand enough to be dangerous." She stopped at the window, staring at the moons. "They destroyed my world seeking our secrets. I escaped with what I could, but they hunt me still." Nick rubbed his temples. "That explains the security sweep. They're not looking for smugglers." "No," her voice hardened. "They're looking for me, and they won't stop until they find me." "Great, just great." He stood, needing to move. "So I'm harboring a fugitive princess from a race of super beings. Any other bombshells you want to drop?" Lorana turned, moonlight catching her profile. "Just one. The hunters who follow me, they don't leave witnesses." The implication sank in. "You're saying if they find you here, everyone in this colony would be considered contaminated?" She met his eyes. "I should leave. Tonight. Like hell." The words escaped before he could think better of them. "You're still not fully recovered. And where would you go?" "I've survived worse situations." "Yeah? Is that why I found you bleeding in a canyon?" Nick moved closer, ignoring her warning look. "Listen, princess, I'm already involved. Might as well be involved all the way." "Don't be foolish," she snapped. "You have no idea what you're offering." "Probably not, but I know what I'm looking at." He gestured to her still too pale complexion. "You need time to heal. You need somewhere to hide. I'm offering both." "Why?" Her golden eyes searched his face. "Why risk yourself for someone you barely know?" Nick thought about lonely nights in the canyon, drawing landscapes that never changed. About fixing broken things because sometimes that was all you could do, in a universe that seemed determined to break everything. "Maybe I'm tired of looking the other way," he said finally. "Or maybe I just like annoying, stuck-up alien princesses. Take your pick." A strange expression crossed her face, gone before he could interpret it. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "I get that a lot," he grinned. "So, Your Highness, want to help me set up some better security?" "I suppose I have little choice," but there was something almost like warmth in her voice. "Though your primitive technology will need significant improvements." They worked through the night, Lorena adapting alien concepts to Earth tech while Nick implemented them. She was brilliant, he had to admit, even if every other sentence contained some variation of, "Your species is hopelessly backward." Dawn found them surrounded by modified sensors and scrambling fields. Lorana had finally succumbed to exhaustion, curled in his office chair with an unlikely grace. Nick draped his jacket over her, earning a sleepy murmur that might have been a threat or a thank you. "Sweet dreams, princess," he whispered, heading for his own bed. "Tomorrow we figure out how to hide an alien fugitive in a mining colony." He could have sworn he heard her laugh softly as he left. Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying dust and secrets across the empty landscape. Somewhere out there, hunters search for their prey. But for now, in a cluttered workshop on the edge of nowhere, an unlikely alliance had formed. Nick didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but watching the suns rise over the colony, he realized he was looking forward to finding out, even if it got him killed. A week after Lorana's revelation, Nick's orderly life had devolved into a complicated dance of deception. By day, he maintained his routine at the maintenance yard. By night, he helped an alien princess modify Earth technology with knowledge that could revolutionize human civilization, if it didn't get them both killed first. "Your species encryption is like using a paper door to stop a plasma cannon," Lorana complained, fingers dancing over the modified security console. Her human disguise had slipped slightly, silver light bleeding through her skin. Maybe you should write a strongly worded letter to our tech department. Nick soldered another connection in place. Right after we figure out why 3 unmarked ships broke atmosphere this morning. Lorana's hand stilled. 3? Yeah. Martinez was all worked up about it. No registry, no flight plan. He looked up, catching her expression. They're not here for the mining, are they? No. She abandoned the console, moving to the window. They're getting closer. How? Your biosignature is masked, and the scrambling field. They're using quantum resonance tracking. Her voice carried an edge of steel. They're following the echo of my genetic pattern through subspace. Nick set down his tools. In human terms? They can smell me. Lorana's disguise flickered again, frustration bleeding through. And they won't stop until they find me. Then we need to leave. The words surprised them both. Lorana turned, golden eyes narrowing. We? Unless you've got another mechanic lined up to help you dodge interstellar manhunters? Nick tried for a grin. Besides, you still owe me for the chicken coop incident. I owe you nothing. But her lips twitched. Though I suppose your primitive skills might prove marginally useful. High praise from your highness. He stood stretching. So, where are we running to? The playfulness vanished from her face. There's a place, a vault, hidden in the mountains north of here. Technology from my people, buried millennia ago. And it can help? It can do more than help. Lorana's voice dropped. It could restore everything that was lost. My people, our civilization. She straightened. But we'll never reach it. The journey is too dangerous, and you've already risked enough. Nick crossed to her, close enough to see the starlight swimming beneath her skin. Try me. Nicholas. Nick. Nicholas. She emphasized the name with royal hauteur. You don't understand what you're offering. The hunters will show no mercy. They'll torture you for information, then erase any trace that you existed. Sounds like Tuesday at the maintenance yard. When she didn't smile, he sobered. Look, I'm not playing hero here, but you're talking about technology that could change everything. And, he hesitated. And maybe I'm tired of fixing other people's broken machines? Lorana studied him with those impossible eyes. You're either very brave or very foolish. You said that already? It bears repeating. She touched his arm, sending a shock of static through him. The vault is 10 days' journey through the worst terrain on this planet. We'd need supplies, transport. I might have an idea about that. Nick grinned. How do you feel about stealing from the mining company? Before she could answer, alarms blared from the security console. Lorana spun, her disguise dropping completely as she read the displays. They're here. 3 units, moving in from different directions. How long? Minutes. Her form shimmered, silver feathers beginning to emerge. I can transform, draw them away. No. Nick grabbed her shoulders. That's what they expect. We do this my way. He pulled her toward the workshop's back wall, triggering a hidden panel. Behind it lay a narrow passage, barely wide enough for 2 people. Maintenance tunnels, he explained at her questioning look, run under the whole colony. I mapped them my first month here. Always planning escape routes? There was something like approval in her voice. Let's just say I like knowing my options. He sealed the panel behind them. This way leads to the vehicle pool. Think you can hotwire a heavy transport? Lorana's laugh echoed in the darkness, crystal chimes with an edge of danger. Oh, Nicholas, I'm going to enjoy showing you what real technology can do. They ran through the tunnels, guided by Nick's memorized path and Lorana's natural glow. Above them, security alerts echoed through the colony. The hunters had arrived. At the vehicle pool's access point, Nick paused. Ready to do something stupid? Lorana's smile gleamed in the dark, fierce and wild. Lead the way, my foolish mechanic. Your mechanic? Would you prefer primitive assistant? Let's stick with Nick. He pushed open the access panel. After you, Your Highness. They emerged into chaos. Colony security had mobilized, lights sweeping the compound as officers responded to the intrusion alerts. In the confusion, No one noticed two figures slipping between the rows of parked vehicles. Nick led them to a massive transport crawler designed for hauling ore through the planet's worst terrain. Lorana placed her hand on the lock panel, and silver light coursed through the circuits. The hatch opened silently. "Show off," Nick muttered. "Efficiency," she corrected, climbing aboard. "Now let me show you what happens when you combine zenitary knowledge with your quaint Earth machines." Her fingers danced over the controls, threading strands of silver light through the systems. The crawler's engine growled to life, but with a different note, deeper, more powerful. "What did you just do?" "Improved it," she smiled sweetly. "Try not to break it with your primitive driving." Shouts erupted from across the compound. Flashlights swept toward them. "Time to go." Nick took the controls, feeling the enhanced power thrumming through them. "Hold on to something, princess. If you scratch this vehicle, I'll—" The rest of her threat was lost as Nick gunned the engine. The crawler shot forward with impossible speed, crashing through the perimeter fence. Behind them, alarms wailed and weapons fired, but they were already accelerating into the desert night. Lorana braced herself against the cabin wall, her disguise completely abandoned now. Silver light pulsed around her in time with the enhanced engine. "That," she said with careful dignity, "was unnecessarily dramatic. Says the woman who crashed in my canyon." Nick checked the rear scanners. "We've got company. 3 ships, closing fast." "The hunters," Lorana's voice hardened. "Head for the mountains. I can mask our signature better in the magnetic fields there." 10 days to the vault, you said." Nick pushed the crawler faster, feeling it respond like no Earth vehicle should. "Want to bet we can do it in 8? Always trying to prove something? But she was smiling, starlight dancing in her eyes. "Very well, Nicholas. Show me what you and your primitive machine can do." "Ready to be impressed, Your Highness." "We shall see." She laid her hand over his on the controls, sending that electric shock through him again. "We shall see." The twin moons cast long shadows across the desert as Nick guided the enhanced crawler through a maze of crystalline formations. 3 days into their journey, and the hunters hadn't given up, but they hadn't caught up either. "Another ship on the long-range sensors," Lorana announced from the co-pilot's seat, her silver hair shimmering in the moonlight. "They're being annoyingly persistent." "Must be your charming personality drawing them in." Nick swerved around a towering crystal spire. "You have that effect on people." "Oh, and what effect would that be?" Her golden eyes flickered to him, challenging. "The overwhelming urge to chase you across a desert planet." He grinned. "Though most of us don't bring battleships." "Pity. And here I thought you were finally showing proper initiative." She adjusted something on the console, sending ripples of silver energy through the systems. "Turn here. There's a cavern network ahead that should mask our signature." The cavern turned out to be more of a crystalline cathedral, its walls shooting rainbow refractions across the crawler's viewport. Nick killed the engine, letting them drift into shadow. "We should rest here," Lorana decided. "The magnetic fields will conceal us for a few hours at least." "Worried about my primitive human need for sleep?" "Merely being practical." She stood, stretching with feline grace. "Though your species' fragility is rather inconvenient. Says the woman I found bleeding in a canyon. A temporary tactical disadvantage? Is that what we're calling it now?" Nick checked the security systems one last time. "You know, you still haven't told me how you ended up in that canyon." Lorana's expression shuddered. "No, I haven't." She moved to the crawler's rear compartment, where they'd set up a makeshift living space. Nick followed, watching as she began her nightly ritual of checking and rechecking their modified systems. "The hunters," he pressed gently. "They caught up to you before?" "Once." Her hands stilled on a control panel. "I miscalculated. Thought I could outmaneuver them in atmosphere. Hence the tactical disadvantage. Hence the canyon." She turned, and for a moment her royal mask slipped. "I've been running so long, Nicholas. Sometimes I forget what it's like to—" "Stop." Nick leaned against the bulkhead, studying her. In the crystal-reflected light, she looked both ancient and impossibly young. "Well, you've stopped now," he said quietly. "Even if it is with a primitive mechanic in a stolen crawler." "Borrowed," she corrected primly. We merely borrowed it. Pretty sure Martinez doesn't see it that way. Sarah Martinez will be adequately compensated when this is over. Lorana's lips curved. Assuming you don't destroy her vehicle with your reckless driving. My driving? Nick raised an eyebrow. Tactical disadvantage wants to critique my driving? Someone has to maintain standards. But she was fighting a smile now. Even in exile, must be exhausting being royal all the time. Must be exhausting, deflecting everything with humor. They stared at each other for a long moment, the air suddenly charged with more than just zenitary energy. A proximity alarm shattered the silence. Lorana moved to the console, her expression sharpening. 2 ships entering the cavern system. Time to move? Nick was already heading for the controls. Wait. She caught his arm, sending that familiar electric shock through him. There's something else. A power signature I haven't seen since... Her eyes widened. Nicholas, we need to go. Now. What is it? They brought a harvester. Fear threaded through her voice. A device designed to extract zenitary genetic material. It's not pleasant. Nick swore quietly. The vault? 3 days if we push hard. She met his eyes. But the terrain will be hell. Yeah. He slid into the pilot's seat. Good thing you've got a primitive mechanic who knows his way around hell. Lorana took her position beside him, silver energy already flowing into the crawler's systems. If we survive this, Nicholas Reiner, I may have to reconsider my assessment of primitive mechanics. High praise indeed, Your Highness. The engine roared to life. Ready to do something stupid? Her answering smile was fierce and bright. With you. Always. They burst from the cavern in a shower of crystal shards, the enhanced crawler responding like a living thing to their combined touch on the controls. Behind them, hunter ships screamed into pursuit, but ahead lay the mountains, and somewhere beyond them, the vault that held the key to everything, if they could reach it in time. You know, Nick said as they accelerated into the night. For someone who claims to hate primitive technology, you seem pretty comfortable with this setup. Perhaps, Lorana admitted, her hand brushing his as they adjusted course. I'm developing a tolerance for certain primitive things. The mountain pass loomed ahead, a jagged wound in the planet's surface. 5 days into their journey, and the hunters had fallen behind. But so had Nick and Lorana's luck. A massive storm system blocked their path, lighting up the crawler's sensors with warnings. We could go around, Nick suggested, studying the readouts. Add a day to the journey, but no time. Lorana's fingers danced across the console, silver energy pulsing. The harvester's range increases with every passing hour. Through the storm is our only option. You sure you want to trust your life to my primitive driving skills? She turned those golden eyes on him, and Nick's breath caught at the intensity in them. I trust you, she said simply. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was ready to address. Nick cleared his throat. Right then, storm it is. They plunged into chaos. Wind howled around the crawler, carrying stinging particles of crystal dust. Lightning fractured the sky in impossible colors, product of the planet's unique atmosphere. The electrical activity is affecting our shields, Lorana reported, her voice tight. I'm rerouting power, but... The crawler lurched as something struck them. Nick wrestled with the controls, feeling Lorana's energy merging with the systems to keep them stable. A little help with the stabilizers? I thought you didn't need help, Mr. I can drive anything? But her power flowed stronger, steadying them. Maybe I just like working with you. The words slipped out before he could stop them. In the storm-lit cabin, he saw Lorana's hands pause briefly on the controls. Careful, Nicholas, she said softly. One might think you're growing attached. Would that be so terrible? Another lightning strike rocked them before she could answer. This time, several systems went dark. Primary power's failing, Nick reported, fighting to keep them on course. We need to find shelter. Lorana's scanning intensified. There, cave system, 2 kilometers ahead. If we can... The next strike hit them dead on. The crawler spun, skidding toward a ravine. Nick felt Lorana's hand close over his on the controls, her power surging through him like a live wire. Together, they hauled the vehicle back from the edge, guiding it through sheets of crystal rain toward the caves. They barely cleared the entrance before everything went dark. In the sudden silence, Nick became acutely aware of Lorana's hand still covering his, starlight pulsing between their joined fingers. "Well," he said, his voice rougher than intended, "that was fun. Your definition of fun needs examination." But she didn't move her hand. "The power core is drained. It will take hours to recharge, even with my help. Guess we're stuck here then." Nick turned to face her in the darkness, lit only by the soft glow of her natural form. "Any other insights into my psychological state you'd like to share?" "Several." Her smile was visible even in the dim light. "Your reckless behavior, for instance. Your insistence on protecting others at your own expense. Your tendency to use humor to deflect genuine emotion. Sounds like you've been paying attention." "I pay attention to many things, Nicholas." Her voice dropped lower. "Including the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." Nick's heart kicked against his ribs. "And how do I look at you?" "Like someone who's found something he wasn't looking for." She moved closer, silver light dancing across her features. "Something that terrifies and fascinates him in equal measure." "That's pretty accurate, actually." "Of course it is." Her free hand came up to trace his jaw, leaving trails of static in its wake. "I am, after all, far more advanced than your species." Nick laughed softly. "There's the princess I know." "Yes, well," she was very close now. "Even princesses can be surprised sometimes." The kiss, when it came, felt like touching lightning. Silver energy crackled between them, and Nick understood suddenly why humans had always dreamed of reaching the stars. Lorana pulled back first, her eyes glowing like twin suns. "That was unexpected?" "I was going to say not entirely unpleasant," but her smile betrayed her. "High praise indeed." Nick tucked a strand of starlit hair behind her ear. "Should I be worried about breaking some ancient zenitary law about fraternizing with royalty?" "Several, actually." She settled against him, her head finding his shoulder. "But I've never been very good at following rules." "Clearly." He wrapped an arm around her, marveling at the way her light seemed to reach for him. "What happens when we reach the vault?" Lorana stiffened slightly. "Nicholas, I know. One crisis at a time." "No." She sat up, meeting his eyes. "You deserve to know. The vault, it contains more than just technology. It holds the essence of my people, their patterns stored in quantum memory. With it, I could restore them. But But it would mean returning to the stars, to my duties, my responsibilities." Her voice caught. "To everything I've been running from." Nick absorbed this. "And where do primitive mechanics fit into that future?" "They don't." She touched his face again. "Which is why this is dangerous." "I'm getting pretty good at dangerous." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And I'm definitely not going anywhere until we figure this out." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside their cave, a princess who carried starlight in her veins curled closer to a mechanic who'd learned to see beauty in broken things. "Rest," Lorana murmured. "I'll watch over the systems." "Wake me if anything tries to kill us." "Always." She kissed him again, lighter this time. "Sleep well, my foolish mechanic." Nick drifted off to the sensation of starlight against his skin, wondering when exactly he'd fallen in love with the impossible. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the cave's crystalline walls. Nick woke to find Lorana still working at the crawler's controls, her silver hair catching the sunrise. "Did you sleep at all?" He moved to join her, noting how the systems had been completely reconfigured overnight. "Zenitari don't require as much rest as humans." She didn't look up, but her energy pulsed brighter as he approached. "Though I did take some time to consider our situation." "That sounds ominous." Now she did turn, her golden eyes serious. "What happened last night? If you're about to say it was a mistake, save it." Nick leaned against the console. "I'm not great at regrets. I was going to say it complicates things." But her lips curved slightly. "Though your assumption is telling." "I'm an open book, Your Highness." "Hardly." She stood, closing the distance between them. You're actually quite complex, Nicholas Reiner. A mechanic who reads ancient poetry. A loner who risks everything to help others. A man who looks at an alien princess and sees past everything she pretends to be. Nick caught her hand, feeling that familiar electric shock. Maybe I just like complicated things. Clearly, her fingers intertwined with his. The vault is 2 days away. Once we reach it? Yeah. He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. About that, I've been thinking. A dangerous pastime. So I've been told. He smiled against her hair. What if we found another way? The vault's technology, your people's knowledge, it doesn't all have to go back to the stars. Lorana stilled. What are you suggesting? Build something new, here, or on another frontier world, somewhere your people could thrive without the weight of ancient politics. He drew back to meet her eyes. Somewhere you could be more than just a princess on the run. Nicholas. Her voice held wonder and warning in equal measure. The Alliance would never allow it. They'd hunt us forever. Let them try, he grinned. I'm getting pretty good at outrunning hunters. You're insane, but her hands tightened on his. It would mean giving up everything I was meant to be. Maybe. Or maybe it means becoming who you want to be. The kiss this time was different, desperate, deep, full of possibilities neither of them had dared consider before. When they finally broke apart, Lorana's glow had intensified to near blinding. You make impossible things sound reasonable, she accused. It's part of my primitive charm. She laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. The storm's passed. We should move before... The proximity alarm screamed to life. Lorana spun to the console, her expression hardening. 3 ships, coming in fast, and... Her hands flew over the controls. The Harvester! They've found us. Nick was already moving to the pilot's seat. How long until they're in range? Minutes, maybe less. She joined him, power flowing into the crawler's systems. Nicholas, if they catch us... They won't. He caught her eye. Trust me? Against all logic and reason, she said softly. I do. The crawler's enhanced engine roared to life. As they burst from the cave into morning light, Nick felt Lorana's hand slip into his on the controls. Together? He asked. Her smile was fierce and bright. Together. They accelerated into the mountain passes, hunters on their tail and the vault ahead. But something had changed between them, as fundamental as the shift from night to day. You know, Lorana said as they wove through a narrow canyon, for a primitive species, humans have some remarkably good ideas. Was that an actual compliment? Don't let it go to your head. But her energy curled around him like a caress. We still have to survive this first. Worth it, though. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Nick saw everything she couldn't say yet, written in starlight across her face. Yes, she whispered. Worth everything. The mountains gave way to an ancient valley where crystalline formations rose like the bones of fallen giants. After 8 days of running, fighting, and growing closer, Nick and Lorana had reached their destination. There! Lorana pointed to a formation that seemed to pulse with inner light. The vault's entrance. Nick guided the crawler to a stop, studying the readings. No sign of the hunters. They'll come, her hand found his. They always do. They gathered their modified weapons and supplies, stepping out into the valley's eerie silence. Up close, the vault's entrance rippled like liquid starlight. Ready? Nick asked. Lorana's response was cut off by a familiar whine overhead. 3 Alliance ships descended from the clouds, weapons primed. Inside! Now! Nick shoved her toward the entrance as energy blasts scarred the ground around them. They dove through the liquid light, landing in a chamber that defied physics. Geometric patterns shifted across walls that seemed built of pure energy, and at the center stood a pillar of living light. The heart of Zenitari, Lorana breathed. It's still active. That's great, but we've got company. Nick fired through the entrance as Alliance hunters appeared. Lorana pressed her hand to a control panel, and the entrance sealed with a crystalline barrier. That won't hold them long. I need to access the core systems. She moved to the central pillar, silver energy flowing from her fingers into the ancient technology. The chamber hummed with power, patterns accelerating across the walls. "Nicholas," she called, her voice tight, "there's something you need to know." "Kind of busy here." He was rigging explosives around the entrance. "They're cutting through. The vault's power, it can restore my people, but the process requires a focal point, a living zenitari to anchor the restoration." She met his eyes. "Once it begins, I'll be bound to the process. Bound to this place." Nick's hands stilled. "For how long?" "Years. Decades, perhaps." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't leave. Couldn't travel. Everything we talked about, building something new somewhere else, would be impossible." He finished setting the charges and moved to her. "So we build it here." "What?" "Here. This valley. We terraform it. Create a sanctuary." He caught her free hand. "Your people return, but on their own terms. No politics, no ancient grudges. Just a chance to start over." The barrier crackled as Alliance weapons fired against it. "They'll never allow it," Lorana protested. "The Alliance wants our technology, our secrets. So we give them some of it." Nick's mind raced. "Controlled exchange. Your people's knowledge for protection. Earth gets advanced tech, the Alliance gets limited access, and your people get a fresh start. That's completely insane." But her eyes shone. "It goes against everything, every tradition. Maybe it's time for new traditions." He pulled her close, even as the barrier began to crack. "You said I was worth everything. Well, you're worth fighting for too. Your people, your future. All of it." The barrier shattered. Alliance hunters poured in, led by a figure carrying the dreaded harvester device. "Step away from the princess," the leader commanded. Nick aimed his weapon. "Not happening." "Nicholas!" Lorana's voice held warning and wonder. "Your choice, princess." He didn't take his eyes off the hunters. "But whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere." Lorana's laugh rang through the chamber, clear as crystal chimes. "My foolish, brilliant mechanic." She pressed her free hand to the pillar. "I choose both." Power exploded from the central pillar. Silver light flooded the chamber as Lorana began the restoration process, but with a twist. Instead of pulling her people's essence back to their ancient homes, she was anchoring it here, in this valley, using the planet's unique crystalline structures as conduits. The hunters' weapons powered down as their systems were overwhelmed by the energy surge. The harvester sparked and died. "What are you doing?" the leader demanded. "Creating something new." Lorana's voice echoed with power. "Your alliance wanted zenitary technology? Let's negotiate." Hours later, as the twin sun set over the valley, Nick stood with Lorana at the vault's entrance. Alliance ships departed overhead, carrying the first of many diplomatic agreements. In the valley below, crystalline structures were already reshaping themselves, forming the foundations of a new settlement. "I still can't believe they agreed," Nick mused. "Humans aren't the only ones who can adapt." Lorana leaned against him, her glow soft in the twilight. "Though I must admit, your primitive negotiating tactics were effective." "You mean threatening to blow up the vault unless they listened?" "Reckless, dangerous, and completely brilliant." She turned to face him. "Rather like you." Pretty sure that was a compliment. "Don't let it go to your head." But she was smiling as she pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of starlight and possibility. When they broke apart, Nick gestured to the valley. "So, ready to build something new?" "With you?" Lorana's eyes sparkled. "Always." Below them, the first echoes of returned zenitari essence began to take form, merging with the planet's crystals to create something neither human nor alien, but beautifully both. "You know," Nick said as they walked down to meet their future, "for an ancient superior species, you zenitari have some pretty good ideas too." "Careful, Nicholas." But her hand found his, silver energy dancing between them. "I might start thinking you're not completely primitive after all." "High praise indeed, Your Highness." "My mechanic," she corrected softly. "Just yours." And in the valley that would become known as New Zenith, an unlikely love story became the foundation of something greater. A bridge between stars and earth, past and future, duty and desire. It wasn't the ending either of them had expected. It was better. A year later, the Valley of New Zenith had transformed into a marvel of engineering and natural beauty. Crystalline structures intertwined with modern Earth technology, creating a city that glowed at night like a scatter of stars. Nick stood on the balcony of the home he shared with Lorana, watching as a new group of Zenitari arrived. Over the past year, nearly 100 members of her people had been restored from the quantum memory of the vault. Each brought something unique to the growing settlement. Dreaming again? Lorana glided up to him, her silver glow blending with the morning light. Or are you just hiding from your responsibilities? I thought being your consort exempted me from paperwork, Nick smirked. Quite the opposite. She handed him a tablet with a holographic display. It makes you doubly responsible for all technical negotiations with the Alliance. Remind me why I signed up for this. Lorana pulled him into a kiss that still sparked with electricity. Because you love impossible challenges. And me. Ah, right. He wrapped his arms around her, watching as a team of Earth engineers worked alongside the Zenitari below on a new terraforming system. You know, when I saved that injured bird in the canyon, I didn't think I'd end up building an interstellar civilization. When I pretended to be that bird, I didn't think I'd fall in love with a primitive mechanic. Her golden eyes sparkled with amusement. I suppose we both got more than we bargained for. Much more, Nick agreed, gazing at the growing city. And this is just the beginning, isn't it? Oh yes, Lorana purred. Wait until you see what I have planned for the next phase of expansion. Your primitive engineering skills are about to face a real challenge. No doubt, Your Highness. Just Lorana, she corrected softly. Here, I'm simply your Lorana. Below, a new day in New Zenith was unfolding, with humans and Zenitari working together to create a future neither could have foreseen. And at the heart of it all stood a mechanic who had learned to see beauty in broken things, and a princess who had found her true home among the stars and the earth. It was only the beginning of their story, and it promised to be magnificent. Dear listeners, the story of Nick and Lorana is more than just a romantic tale of two worlds colliding. It's a story about how life's most unexpected twists can lead us exactly where we're meant to be. In a world where technology evolves at a dizzying pace and the boundaries between possible and impossible blur every day, this story serves as a reminder of what truly matters. The courage to be ourselves, the ability to see beauty in our differences, and the strength to choose our own path, even when it defies the expectations of others. In Nick and Lorana, each of us can find a piece of ourselves, the desire to break free from prescribed roles, the drive to reach for something greater, and the willingness to take risks for those we love. New Zenith has become a symbol of what happens when we dare to dream of the impossible and work to make those dreams a reality. It's a reminder that sometimes the best traditions are the ones we create ourselves. Thank you for sharing this journey with our heroes. I hope their story inspires you to find your own path to the stars, no matter how distant they may seem. And remember, even the most extraordinary adventure begins with a simple choice: to extend a hand to someone in need. With gratitude, the author, P.S. And yes, somewhere in the crystalline valley of New Zenith, a mechanic and a princess are still arguing about primitive technology while building a future neither of them dared to imagine.